Welcome everyone to Data Innovation Summit 2020. The panel we have today is how to adapt your data strategy for the rise of artificial intelligence in business. And I have three really great guests with me today. Please introduce yourselves. Chris?
Hi, I'm Chris Hillman, and I'm the Data Science Director in the EMEA region for Teradata.
Excellent. Johan?
Hi, my name is Johan Lövh. I work for Microsoft covering global accounts, specializing in data and AI.
Excellent. And Pelin?
Hi everyone, Pelin Ozbozkurt. I'm the Data Science Director working for EMEA.
Excellent. So let's get it off and get started right away. Why don't you guys tell me a little bit, in your experience, what the identifiable characteristics are of a modern data strategy? What are the things you can point at and say, these are things that you see in modern data strategies? Chris, what do you say?
Yeah, okay. I mean, there's certain things that are, standard, like governance and privacy and all of this kind of thing. But, I think we see now that you have to take into account the advanced analytic processing needs as well. So it's not just a case of, the old world of like standard reporting. You've really got to start looking at what those needs are for the advanced analytics, and that includes the technology capabilities. And I think the other thing that we see a lot is having to take account of how literate people are with the data. So there's a key thing that's data understanding, and if you don't get that right, it's not just a case of serving up data and saying it's there, you can use it. You really have to understand how much people understand of the data before they can use it.
Right. Johan, what do you say? Data literacy is one of those topics. Are customers able to explain what they want when they're talking about what they want from a modern data strategy or a modern data platform?
Yeah, I think I would start from a different angle. And we see a lot of discussions around setting up the modern data platform in a different way from a governance perspective, moving away from the more traditional operation model with the one central team being responsible for ingesting everything into one data platform. We still see the one data platform approach, but a lot of organizations are looking into a more federated approach, or what sometimes is called the data mesh approach, where you break up the central approach and have an approach with a combination of data publishers being responsible for onboarding data to the data platform, and data product develop teams being responsible for creating the contents and the applications. And what Chris was talking about, the ability not only to build BI solutions, but also to create advanced analytics on top of it.
Does that mean that an advanced AI and analytics platform is very much defined by the tech stack that it lives on? Or is it as much culture and other things?
I would say it's a combination. The change in the operation model and the movement into the federated data mesh approach, I would say, is an organizational one, but it's still a data platform approach, and you still need to have a platform to build things on top of. So I would say it's two things really.
Pelin, what would you say are the key characteristics of a modern data strategy?
Well, I guess in order to answer that question, maybe we should ask, what are we going to do with the data, right? Data is going to be at the center of business decisions, and business decisions today must be flexible, agile, and innovative in order to keep up with the challenge that we are having today. And I believe that should reflect to the data management, data strategy. So, for example, think about flexible. So I think that's the most important critical feature that we should have, and it refers to many different things. For example, flexible data strategy could be something related to cloud adoption. So we see, for example, some of our customers have completed their cloud journey, and they are doing all this data management strategy in cloud. Some of them are still at the beginning of their journey and they need some hybrid solutions. I think it should be connected way in terms of getting more value out of it. And I think another important characteristic is having an agile data management, that you don't need to think about where to store data, how to get data, which type of data you have. And these are all connected to creating an innovative solution. So I think these are all the keywords that are connected to each other that should reflect to data strategy of organizations.
Right. Well, I think a lot of companies now are hearing that they should be investing in advanced analytics and AI, and some of them are having trouble verbalizing exactly what they need. Sometimes it's because they say, we don't really have enough data to do anything interesting, or even many people on the panels today are saying, you don't really need advanced AI, linear regression is enough to solve most problems that your business faces. Chris, what do you say to that? Not having enough data and you don't need advanced AI. I mean, is advanced AI a necessity?
Yeah, I mean, on the regression can do most of the stuff. I mean, we, as data science professionals, we do have to walk a very fine line between being visionary and being innovative and talking about the future, but also keeping an eye on what actually makes money and what works. So there is a very fine line there. But on the, and you have to just test things. Things have to stand on their own 2 feet. You can't say this is better because it's newer. It has to, the results have to be there, which often they are for newer techniques. But on the data availability, I mean, there's a very different between a data strategy and a data architecture, so the strategy is very much about use cases and business needs and things like that. And I think if that drives it, then the data will be found. I think if you do it the other way around and try and build it and they will come, doesn't really work for these kind of plans.
I think that's very nice, and that we should, frame all these great sentences that we hear today, that if you come up with a good business case, you'll find a way to find the data for it. Johan, what do you mentioned, federated data stores and other things. Can you give an example of some customers that have been adopting, or what verticals perhaps have been adopting these techniques and finding use from them? Johan.
Yeah, so I think the most of the use case I've seen are from since I work in the retail sector, so of course it's from the retail sector, but actually also from Microsoft internally. We have adopted these kinds of more flexible ways of hydrating the data lake actually, yeah. But I think Microsoft is probably pretty advanced, I would say. The use cases I've seen, I think. Actually,
would you say that you're very cloud-centric with regards to your advanced analytics initiatives, or is it equally as much on-prem?
No, when I look at my customers in the retail sector, and when I look at internally, it's a cloud first. I mean, looking at the need to store, when you look at retail, there is a lot of data when you need to do data science, and I mean the data lake storage in the cloud is pretty much it's hard to beat that actually. And when it comes to Microsoft internally, we analyze all of, for an example, all of the Azure telemetry in detail. Yeah. So I would say, from my perspective, the cloud is a necessity. It's not possible to do it on premise in a flexible way, actually.
That's very nice to hear somebody say something. Yeah, it's very nice to hear somebody say it that concretely, because a lot of times there's a little bit of this and a little bit of that, but it's fun to hear somebody say something like the cloud is a necessity, because I think a lot of people are looking for guidance. One thing that right now is very transformative in my mind is deep learning. And it's because it can solve types of business problems that you haven't been able to solve before. And that's why AI is really seeing a resurgence now. And yet a lot of people are still talking about what you can do with linear regression or with decision trees and that kind of thing. And these are old technologies. You know, Leo Bremen made random forest in early 2000s, and the other techniques we've had for half a century. So Pelin, in your mind, is there something really different happening that's making people suddenly be so interested in statistics? Or is it really deep learning that's driving all these things? Where is the balance between these really cutting-edge AI techniques and these more fundamental techniques that companies are now thinking maybe we should have this in place? Have they not had it in place before? Or how do you see all of that?
Well, I see a combination, to be honest. So sometimes with some use cases, some project, we really need to go back to the basics. So regression might be your rescue technique in some of the cases. But if you are interested in some more advanced, like image recognition, voice recognition type of techniques, then it's all about deep learning. It really depends on the type of data as well. Well, I guess the reason why data scientists are getting more interested in deep learning is the latest investments. Because I'm a statistician, and I know that traditional statistical models are sometimes, it's hard to get the accuracy when you feed the algorithms with more data. And today, with the AI investments, we have lots of data coming from everywhere, and data scientists naturally want to use that data to improve their outcomes. And that is where deep learning comes into the picture. So we can train the model as much as we want with more data, and we can just achieve more trustable, accurate models. So that's where the new investments are focusing on these days, and it's so exciting. But still, I believe, as a theoretical statistician, to be honest, it should be a combination in real life.
For sure. Let me follow up with one question, and that is, I think a lot of customers say, yeah, it's cool and all, this new advanced machine learning, but it's too advanced for us. We don't have that complicated business. Do you feel that these advanced techniques apply equally to all verticals, or are they more apt to some than others? Like in banking, where they've been doing statistics for a long, long time, are they prone to jump to the next level, or is there a difference across verticals in terms of how ready they are to adopt these new techniques?
To me, that question is.
Sure. Yeah.
All right. Well, I wouldn't divide the industries in order to answer that. I think it's more related to what they want to achieve. So banks, for example, they have been doing data science for many years, but if they are looking for innovative solutions, then that innovation might either come from the data sources, or it's the machine learning techniques that they are going to apply to the same data source. So it's just about what they would like to achieve. But for some industries, maybe I could say there are some regulations coming with deep learning. They may not be able to use that kind of black box techniques. But other than that, I think it's all about the data science life cycle, that if they want to try new things, they will achieve new models.
Yeah. I think when trying out a lot of these new techniques, it's very easy for computer engineers to get excited and try it, in their playground, on their workstations, on spare machines and that kind of thing. Chris, Teradata has a legacy of doing statistics and very enterprise-ready solutions for advanced data analysis. How do you see the balance between what we've seen before, but are seeing again, that people are using these sort of homebrew tools, and how they live next to the solutions that Teradata offers? Are they supposed to be separate, or should they be done together?
Yeah, that's really interesting, because, I know it's really generalizing, but we kind of separate the life cycle into three different parts. So there's everything to do with data, there's everything to do with model fitting, and there's everything to do with deployment, production. And, the middle bit, the model fitting, the training, is the bit that gets focused on so much, because it's the interesting bit, it's the magic, isn't it? and to be honest, that's the bit where we feel the data scientists should be pretty much free to use the tools they want to use, because in one team you'll have an R guy, a SAS guy, a Python guy, and forcing them to use a tool they're not familiar with is just ridiculous, because that's their skills. So I think the way to keep the control and the governance is to have, the data part in an enterprise platform, and then have some, we call it analytic ops, but I think most people say ML ops, machine learning operations. Have some system of pushing stuff into deployment on a deployment platform. And then you get the best of both worlds. The data scientists can have their playground. And then it also gives you some kind of accountability through the process. So you know where the data came from, you know where the production was done.
So it needs to be both together, in other words. It's not an either or.
It has to be. It has to be. You can't have, the Wild West on the data side. And then again, you can't have tight governance on the model training tools, because there'll always be, these are smart people. They'll always find another way of doing it if you say they can't do it that way.
Yeah. Johan, I'm very curious about, Microsoft has been deploying a lot of software as a services that build on these sort of open source and hacker tools, as I call them, Kubernetes and a number of other things, and you're putting them on the cloud. What sort of mindset do companies need to have in terms of the cadence of adopting these new technologies and being ready and knowing that they will have to reinvent themselves every X number of years? Because I think many people are hoping that they can make one investment in a tool and then keep it for 10, 15 years or something. And that seems unreasonable, or maybe not. What are your thoughts on that? Should people invest everything in Kubernetes as a way to virtualize their services and expect that to be the virtualization platform of the coming 10 years, or should they have another mindset?
Well, I guess the mindset that you need to have is that it will definitely change. It's a extremely fast-paced world with a lot of innovations in it. So, from a Microsoft perspective, we have invested in both the Spark technologies with Databricks and also the pipelining with Azure Machine Learning Services that actually helps you a bit with the process of doing the data pipelines, putting things into production a bit smoother. So I would think that the DevOps parts are definitely here to stay. There will be a lot of frameworks. There are a lot of frameworks, but I guess that you will need to worry less about how to set up your Kubernetes cluster in the future. So that's where I think the innovations are going, actually.
Is there a way of working that makes it easier to make that transition? If you know that you're going to have to reinvent yourself every 3 years, is there something you can do to set yourself up for not making it as painful every time you have to transition? I suppose you'd say that using the cloud makes things simpler. Is there anything else?
Even if things change, so some things are. The model are still there, and the coding is a bit similar. So from a developer perspective, I think you will still have the flexibility and the openness of the platform to choose if it is R or if it is Python. And your development environment. I think the things that will change is the way things are deployed and automated, and you shouldn't need to worry about that anyway. So I think that's one way to look at it, I would say.
Right. All right. Well, I think one of the things that these large platforms are doing is making it not only ready at hand for data scientists, but also making the data available to decision makers and operational information workers. Pelin, I'd like to hear your thoughts on, people have been referring to this as data democratization for a long time, making these tools and data available to the people in the organization readily to accelerate. Can you give an example of where that's not been really done the correct way, or where the outcome has not been as intended? People really love to hear examples of where you can make mistakes so that they can avoid them.
Well, first of all, I should say I agree with you. I mean, it's all about, in order to create innovation, you have to work as a team. And that team has line of business people, data scientists, data engineers, and they have to reach out to the same set of data, which is actually called data democratization. But there are some challenges with that. The most important one is probably security. So we have to keep the data as secure as possible, and integrity. So it should stay as the same. That's some of the issues we are having in real life. I couldn't give you a real example here, but just the generic examples maybe I could mention. Another one is maybe as dangerous as the security is to come up with their own insights coming from data. If you don't know what to do with the data or what the data really means, then that creates some issues that might affect the strategies from scratch, which is a problem. And I think the way to deal with it is to create the secure cloud platform, and that's one of the things what we are trying to do with Oracle.
Right. I think a lot of these practices are really coming and starting to mature right now. The people are finding that these ways of collaborating are giving benefits and are willing to share this type of information with each other. Chris, I'd like to hear, Teradata has a long and esteemed history, and in the past decade has incorporated a lot of what we probably now refer to as the big data platforms, meaning Hadoop and a lot of those technologies. What role do you see those 2010 technologies in today's 2020 AI landscape? Are they still relevant, or have we moved beyond them, or have they become sort of scaled down and with the bare essentials remaining that provide value? What's the story around that technology with respect to AI and advanced analytics?
Yeah, I think it's something that Johan said about the data mesh. I mean, we see that there is a place, it was never all about one thing fits all, so if you want to do advanced use cases like image and video recognition, then you need these platforms to store that kind of data. I think we also see it for kind of the kind of deep history. If you've got a company that's got 20 years worth of transactions, like a retailer basket data, you don't need to keep all of that in a data warehouse system with access. So there's definitely a case of the English expression is horses for courses, but I don't know if that translates. But it's this data is fit for that because of what it's actually used for. I think what we don't see the big data platforms so much for is the processing. I think that's what's changed to me, is that if you go back 10 years when there was the big hype, it was that they were going to take it. That's where all the processing was going to be done. And I don't see that so much now. I think, I think the storage is still valid.
Right. Johan, what do you say? I mean, Microsoft has a lot of services that break out that type of functionality that used to be a part of these complete big data platforms. Streaming now is usually viewed separately, hosting is viewed separately, and that kind of thing. So what function do those old big data platforms, I shouldn't say old, but those packaged data platforms have in today's landscape?
Well, I think there were a lot of interesting innovations that we will most definitely take with us. Chris mentioned the data lake, of course, with the bottomless storage and extremely cheap. Spark engine with better performance than the Hadoop. That is one thing that's definitely still there and will be there. And of course, Kafka for streaming, if to pick three things.
Are Spark and Kafka still big players in your experience now?
Yeah, I would say so. I think from Microsoft's perspective, we're trying to bridge the worlds of, I think maybe that was what you were after, the world of big data with the world of data warehousing, with the Synapse offering, where we have a combination of Spark engines and SQL data warehouse engines and SQL on demand. So trying to melt it into to one experience on top of the data lake, both for data scientists and for BI and data warehouse developers, as well as for data explorers.
Right.
So, but I mean, the spark is there, and the maybe not Kafka yet, but who knows? Soon.
Pelin, in your mind, these new breeds of tools, the 2020 tools, I suppose, if you will, that machine learning engineers and others use, are they slowly being incorporated into the standard offerings of Oracle, or do you see that they should be sort of kept at a sandbox place, and then you have the enterprise solution as a separate sort of track?
Data science and data management from a platform perspective. So we believe, I think that's the answer to big data related question as well. We believe whatever we define the data is either data lakes, Hadoop, NoSQL, data warehouse. It should be the real foundation, accurate source that will feed the data science models. And in Oracle, that's what we are trying to do. We are offering a flexible platform for data scientists. They can scale up object storage and GPU if they're interested in deep learning and write their own codes with Python, TensorFlow, R, SQL, whatever they want to. Or they can create a data warehouse instance and use Oracle in database machine learning capabilities, or they can try both. So what we try to do is really create the best foundation to achieve the robust machine learning in production, which actually do not fail.
Right, all in one place. That sounds good. Well, we still would like to end with a teaser for our audience. So, Chris, if you would think of what the next up-and-coming technology that you guys have your eye on with respect to AI and advanced analytics, what would you say that technology is?
That's a good one. I think, the one thing for me that needs to really be ramped up is the labeling, auto labeling.
Okay. Yeah. Automatic label to help machine learning practitioners get their hands off that sort of tedious job.
Exactly.
All right, Johan, what about you? What do you think is the next up and coming big thing?
Well, I actually think that's an interesting area. If we are talking about the same thing here, I think some people call it trying to create a feature store. I think maybe that's what you're after with auto labeling. Mm-hmm. I think that is an area where I guess that we will see a lot of innovation and maybe frameworks coming up in the near future. From another perspective, and the things that I see a lot of at my customers, that is actually a lot of accelerators when it comes to creating the foundation, or what we talked about in the beginning, the data mesh or the data lake. Having accelerators that actually support data publishers to hydrate the data lake without writing an ETL code. That's an area where I think we'll see a lot of improvements soon.
Cool. Pelin, what do you say?
Well, I have two things that I cannot decide which one I would say first, but I think the first one is using deep learning in a more unsupervised way to probably increase, maybe that matches Chris' point, to increase the labeled data, because we don't have the starting point most of the time when we try to do machine learning or deep learning. Right. And second one is matching with Johan's point, it's more like better feature engineering, because when we start with real projects, we start with thousands of attributes, which we don't know which one will be more important. So if we can improve that process, maybe probably with AutoML or better feature engineering, that will be really useful.
Mm-hmm. Cool. Feature, that's something we've been hearing a lot in the talks today, is feature engineering, feature store, federated learning, and that kind of thing. It's neat to hear it from all of you. Thank you very much for the session today. It was interesting talking to you. I hope the audience took notes, and I will be seeing you all at the next session. Thank you very much.